Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
Want awesome health? How about doubling your energy? With our free Awesome Health course, you can get a new video and lesson every single day for 84 straight days. The course covers everything from optimizing your digestion, nutrient intake, correct health issues, including weight, skin, energy, immune system, and so much more. The course could easily be worth $200 or $300 for, and yet it's 100% free when you go to bioptimizer.com. That's bioptimizers.com. Once you're there, just enter your name and email to get the first 3 phases of the Bioptimization report. You'll get the report immediately and begin getting your video lessons each and every day from there on in.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we have a returning guest. Her name is Christine Rosche, and she is a board-certified nutrition specialist and microbiome health expert who has developed an integrative approach to digestive health based on 25 years experience in the healthcare field. She developed and taught courses to Stanford University Medical Center and is the author of 2 books, the latest, Light Living, an integrated approach to stress management and weight. Christine has maintained a private practice in medical nutrition therapy counseling since 1983 and specializes in customized digestive health consulting for all types of stress and digestive issues, including constipation, diarrhea, IBS, IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, SIBO, heartburn, absorption issues, and gut permeability. And she joins us today. Welcome back to the show, Christine. Where are you at this afternoon?
I am in Palo Alto, California, and it's a pleasure to be back.
That's a great part of the world, out of the mayhem and into the sunshine, I like to say, down there.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So, a lot's happened since we last spoke. And for better or worse, I think over the last, say, 4 or 5 years, since the unfolding of the pandemic, and for a lot of people, and I'm going to go right to the heart of the matter. So there was a pandemic, and then there was a pandemic response, and that pandemic response was supported essentially, what has turned out now to be a propaganda campaign. And what I mean by that is, in the world of science, you have to have data to support your claims. And under what happened during the pandemic is an emergency situation was issued that led to bypassing of normal processes and putting forth the therapies recommended by the government of most of the countries of the world, many of the countries of the world. And a lot of people were essentially coerced into going along with them despite what they might have felt, or despite reservations because of lack of testing. The lack of testing was allowed because of those situations. And now, since that time, what we can say is this. Now, there are people on both sides of the camp, and I want to be fair to both sides of it. But the reality is the life expectancy in virtually all of the countries who implemented the government systems with the jab and all that sort of stuff has decreased. And it's decreased precipitously. And it's decreased specifically in younger aged people. And basically, let's not even talk about malfeasance. Let's not even talk about some kind of conspiracy. What we need to do is address what's happening on the ground right now. And what's happening on the ground right now is that people are dying at record rates at ages never seen before. And I'd like to kind of lean on you to see if there was any implications of these therapies that affects the microbiome and that has been and what we can do about it, because whatever you side of the camp is, that has been done, and what we're here to do is to deal with the situation as it is to the best of our ability. What's your opinion on all that?
Great, Wade. Well, thank you so much for bringing that right up. One of the key, what my opinion is, after having seen clients, especially the younger population in the last few years, who have gotten, worse and worse. I mean, I see young people in their 20s who are not absorbing their nutrients. They're
Right.
basically, they come in with 20 to 50 supplements in a bag, and they say, I've been to see every person that you can imagine, average, 5 doctors, and I'm not getting better. I have severe fatigue. I've got, issues in all areas of my body. And it turns out, we know from functional healthcare that how your body functions, one of the root causes is what's happening in your gut microbiome. It's not just in the intestines, it is in the entire body. So what's important for you to know is, the microbes migrate from the intestines into every cell of the body. So for example, some of the research shows that a well-known virus, over the last couple of years altered the gut microbiome dramatically, both in people who had the conventional treatment or who did not.
Right. And so that's a really critical point for people to understand. Whatever side of the fence you have to be, we're here to help people where they're at now. So you're saying that the implications of the pandemic and the various forms that kind of went around has disrupted the microbiome
significantly, and
whether you got the treatment or not doesn't matter.
Exactly. However, you could get people who got the treatment ended up sometimes getting worse. Sometimes people who didn't get the treatments got worse. You see,
is that because of genetic individuality or microbiome stuff or some other factors that we don't know?
It's many factors, and the microbiome determines how inflamed you are based on the composition and diversity. Imagine a beautiful garden, you're tending to a garden, and we all have weeds growing in our garden. So what we want to do is snip those weeds as soon as, different things. We want to get rid of the bad, and we want to bring in diversity, richness, vibrancy, right? So what happened is we ended up already as a nation having a much less diverse microbiome, which is one of the root causes of what happens with the immune system. Then is that when you have a lack of diversity, what happens is you've got an inflammation overgrowing. And
is that inflammation because you're not able to break down your food properly or to extract nutrients? And that's like, can you explain how that inflammation happens to for people so they understand why that would happen, why that would be a side effect of that condition?
Inflammation is triggered by dysbiotic bacteria when the bad weeds overgrow the good. And so the way we're living our lives, just when you look at the blue zones, you look at people, who live in the blue zones, the type of exercise in fresh air. We have very polluted air, which, by the way, was a significant factor when this pandemic hit, is people living in pollution. The other is an altered composition from the very beginning because of the way we eat. The soil is depleted, eating on the run, eating quickly, not getting enough rest, high stress, and drinking tap water, which most people told me they were doing. All of that, when you look at the amount of exposure of toxins in the last 10 years, quadrupling, autoimmune disease, going up 4 to 5 times than ever. The graphs are like, totally up 90 degrees, 180 increase is just phenomenal. And it has to do with these factors and intersecting just at that time. So I believe the reason that people weren't absorbing is from the very beginning, they don't have the microbes they need to make the absorption factors. So
another question I have obviously, this was an extreme level of stress that people were undergoing with all of the tactics put on the news, the divisions politically about what you should do, the coercion that was happening in employees or within your social circles. the inability to go to regular restaurants and stuff, the changing of the food supply, you know, you like McDonald's and Burger King and things like that were open, but like other stores, locals. So we had a complete shift of society. So, you know, to be fair, we have to look at all of those facts. Like the one thing that drives me bananas in the world today is that the question is, well, what's the one thing that I got to do? And I prefer what Tim Grover said when dealing with, you know, how was excellence created, when he was referring to like people like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. He says, it's everything. It's not one thing, it's everything all the time. And as health advocates, people listening to this, and anybody listening to this, I know they're interested in health. They're already in a small group of the population. And it's easy to get condemnatory about what people did or what people didn't, or what people know or what people don't know. We're in an advantage and a disadvantage. And the advantage is we have access to people and experts like yourself who can provide insight using real scientific data without, say, the political funding bias apparatus, which now has been exposed. And then to say, hey, look, these are all the factors contributing. Let's start knocking them out one by one and doing the other things. And so we're looking at stacking the deck in our favor under the current circumstances, but the current circumstances have changed. If I heard you correctly, the current circumstances changed radically.
Yeah, dramatically, especially with the introduction of Roundup. For example, where I live, the school grounds are still being sprayed with glyphosate.
Wow.
So we have here in
which is an antibacterial agent, right?
Right, but it's also a very strong pesticide.
Yes.
Kills everything. So when you look at what's happened agriculturally to our soil and how we produce our food, that is one of the core things, because it's the food we eat, the air we breathe, the exercise, the stress level markedly reduces the gut microbiome diversity. And people weren't getting sleep, right? So sleep is a key factor in all the research. And so the good news is that we have now studies that show what species were depleted during this major time, and what precursors we need to do to bring those back to revitalize the body and help absorb and digest and live with vitality.
Well, this is super exciting. So what species were depleted during this recent cycle of events globally that's impacted people?
So,
and what do you, how is that affecting our health?
You do? Exactly.
And then we'll go to the next phase, which is what you can do to repopulate your gut biome.
Right. So the most important thing is, I want to start with what was drastically altered, which showed, you know, basically the fungi was expanding. So there was fungal, all the different fungi, especially Aspergillus, was proliferating, causing severe fungal symptoms, you know, aggravation of autoimmunity, brain fog, allergy. This was found in studies in Massachusetts, all around the world. The other thing that happened is that basically they found that all the microbiome, if you've got a mucosal barrier that's out of balance, in other words, if your gut integrity is compromised, and whether people, you know, where they were exposed to this type of virus or also the treatment, what happened is with that kind of barrier, they were having more issues with inflammation than ever before. But basically, what we found is, you know, all the good species were wiped out, 80% of them, and we found that Bifidum longum, BD536, was a precursor for F. prausnitzii, which is an anti-inflammatory microbe. So they found that all these reactions, you know, that, I mean, BD536, once you have a higher F. prausnitzii, you're going to have fewer allergies, fewer infections, better, and you know, and so we gave people an iodine mouthwash. They killed the bad bacteria and had them take BD536 and different specific soil-derived bacteria, which lowered lung and organ inflammation. Also, LKC D128 protects against all influenza strains around the world and reduces, all of this. But basically, Enterococcus was increased. I would say the biggest one was the mouth and the stool. They did that. So studies all over was called Enterococcus fecale, increased exponentially in the mouth and the colon, and then traveled to all the organs. So that's where that high level of inflammation was.
So just as a question, because I'm curious about this, was it was the virus actually affecting the bacteria, or was it the mRNA treatments that were affecting the bacteria, or was it both? And if it was both, how did they impact things differently?
Well, that's the $1 million question, right?
That's what we do. We ask $1 million questions here.
Because, I've been looking at all the data. What we do know is that people with a compromised microbiome, which everyone went through so much stress, lack of sleep, lowered gut diversity. If you don't have the strong microbes, especially F. prausnitzis, one of the key players, Akkermansia, if that is wiped out, then no matter which treatment you're talking about, you're going to be at a serious disadvantage. And the key is when you're eating the foods, which the United States is basically consuming in large amounts, right, that are loaded with certain pesticides and herbicides. And then even if you eat organic, you're getting traces of that.
Just a point on that. The USDA allows for 50 different chemicals to be grown on organically grown food. Right. And sometimes that food is being transported on trucks that are being power bombed with a bunch of chemicals as they cross borders and stuff like that. So I wash my vegetables in a pH, an alkalized pH of 11.5 with an ionization machine. And the reason I do that, because it makes the water molecule small enough that it'll penetrate the oil-based pesticides, because those are sprayed with oil-based, so they resist water. And then that you can just see the stuff coming out, like you can see this goop coming off your vegetables, and it's frightening.
Yeah. And so, so we're looking at people in our practice. I work with several groups of doctors who were looking at, wow, what's going on? Because part of it was all these microbes were also destroyed by the diet, the pesticides, and the combination of lifestyle, the fact that the air so polluted, there was already a precursor. Now, one more thing that isn't brought up a lot that you will love is that I did research on the effects of EMF and other frequencies on the gut microbiome. And sure enough, that, everyone is bombarded. We all have our phones on all day. We're spending time. The more that you touch your fingertip on a cell phone, the more you're starting these inflammatory cytokines in the body, according to the German studies. It's not published in the US. I'm from Europe, so I read German research.
I know Dr. Ruggiero was talking about EMF-resistant bacteria strains recently. We had a conversation with our microbiology lab in regards to that. And it sounds pretty far out, but this is becoming more and more to the forefront in research. And I was talking to one of our genetics experts and suggested that people vary significantly in their tolerance to EMF, and there may be genetic reasons for that. So you've got genetics, and then you got your microbiome, which are working symbiotically, as well as your diet and lifestyle, because it's a symbiotic relationship with the bacteria. They have to eat the right food in order to proliferate. And if they get the wrong food, they die off and the bad guys grow. And it's really like that.
And it's an ongoing, what they found is that the gut-lung connection is so strong when you look at immunity. They found that if you culture the gut and you see what's there, it migrates to the lungs. And so the people that had the worst lung outcome with the pandemic were the ones that started out with a really bad gut. They had a leaky gut, they had an inflamed gut. All these bad bacteria migrated up, right? So they did a lot of hospital studies that people who started out with bad bugs multiplied 100-fold were more likely to have serious outcome than people who started out with good, right? But it's also the combination, as you were saying, of each of these. And if you live near a cell tower, which most people do, 5 miles, 10 miles, you're driving by, I do a whole course now on EMF and the microbiome in my practice, because I teach people what to do, to protect themselves at home. It's I have a building biologist on my team who goes out to the house, all that. But the key is you need to know that also the towers have increased and quadrupled. And in our area, the tenfold just in a few months, people are reporting, wow, this is really affecting my sleep, which then translates to more inflammation, more leaky gut, autoimmunity and all of that. So I want to say that EMF at the same time as all this was happening, the impact of EMF needs to be highlighted also.
Well, that's it's so again, this goes back to, it's not one thing, it's a combination of things. And then oftentimes one of those things kind of trips the cascade, and that's you have a collapse of the system, because at any given time we're suffering from a variety of conditions in the body that our immune system is able to kind of keep at bay, everything from cancer to various infections to bacteria overgrowth or whatever. However, as you keep stacking up the inputs that are suboptimal, then eventually it comes overloaded. And our conditioning is to look for, oh, it's this one bacteria or this whole thing. But we have to look at our immune system as a response to our lifestyle choices and our environments, which are influencing our capacity to handle things. And I think, you're on the cutting edge of this type of thinking, and it's starting to shift. And it's exciting that, you've worked with Stanford and the new age of doctors, which are starting to recognize this relationship. But the reality is, from a policy perspective and from a perspective, it's very unlikely that you're going to get this information in a succinct amount of time from your doctor or expertise in the medical field, because of the slow moving nature of those organizational structures. And so as the individual, we have to just accept where we are right now, and to be able to take mitigation strategies in order that we can optimize. And that's the good news. The good news is, well, yeah, those things are stacked against you, but how do we stack them for us, I guess, would be the next. Like, what do we do? What do we do to start getting us in, to turn the tide in our favorable direction?
Yes. And that is the key. Wade, one of them is what I love to tell people is, because they always say to me, is coffee bad for me? What should I do in the morning? The key is, when you start your day with lemon water and you add, fennel. Fennel is one of the biggest gut healing foods. I mean, we have so much gut healing just in our normal foods, eat fennel, make fennel tea, prebiotics, sauerkraut, kimchi, even pickles are great for you before you eat. But starting a day with lemon water, aloe vera juice, is fantastic. Doing some rebounding on your rebounder to start improving the lymph, which no one's talking about, but it gets the lymph flowing. It boosts your immune system. And
yeah, for our listeners, the lymph is 3.5 times the volume of the blood system, and it's our detoxification pathways. And nobody talks about this in medicine.
Exactly. So you start out your day with some lemon water to help the liver flush, and then you have a fennel tea, and then you make a smoothie with greens, because all the research shows that, bone broth of whatever kind, especially the gelatinous bone broth with the dark leafy greens, that's what we're doing in the people that are really depleted. We have them have a cup of bone broth, with bok choy, kale, steamed vegetables, have them the green smoothie in the morning, keeping their, coconut cultured yogurt. And it's amazing the difference we have seen in people, and have some aloe, because one of the biggest epidemics that I've seen in my practice is that people are addicted to sugar. It turns out that sugar lowers your immunity overnight by 80%. They've done studies with college students, a couple of candy bars, measured their white cells, immune, had them take a test the next morning, 80% reduction in immunity.
One question that I have, because there's a lot of information out there suggesting there's a lot of people on sort of the keto or more paleo versions, like, or carnivore, even a more extreme. What is it about having your morning with these type of plants and vegetables and herbs and stuff that you're adding? Why is that so important for getting our microbiome? Because it's counter to some of those narratives, and I'd like to just clarify that from your research.
Yeah, that's excellent. When this all started, I went on a YouTube with one of my teachers, and we said, let's make purple foods like purple cabbage, polyphenol rich, right? Beets, and also look at all of purple rice, black rice, because the research showed that those foods high in those polyphenols was actually gobbling up any kind of a virus, but especially in depleted immunity. So you go out and you get whatever is purple and you make a stew or a soup. And it's the combination of the purple with the dark leafy green that creates, it's the ingredients in that boosts the immune system significantly.
That's very interesting. And one of my genetic experts on our team had mentioned the other day, because I was explaining, I'm putting out and advocating for the ultimate, what I call the ultimate fiber formula for all causes mortality. And I believe that different fibers feed different bacteria cultures. We're seeing that in our lab. And I don't have all the nuances down, but I'm working through that. And another thing that she suggested is that there's methyl donor groups inside of these vegetables that aren't available. Do you know anything about that? Or
I've heard that what happens is, when you take the plants especially and you mix them together, it's the unique combination that creates methyl donors and also unique microbes that help you immediately to have much better absorption in your gut. This is a big part of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyone who has lived in Canada on a cold day and come in and had one of my mother's garden stews would understand that when you eat this, there's something going on beyond the combination of the vegetables that are inside there. And it's using all those things that you talked about. And I was fortunate enough as a child to be exposed to an organic garden grown at home and the benefits of the vegetables. And I remember when I went off to university and I started eating the university food, and much of it kind of looked the same. It didn't taste the same, but I noticed major changes in my physiology, inflammatory stuff, weight gain, things like that. They call it the freshman 20 or whatever. And I was like, wow, what's going on here? And then I would come home in the summer and work, and be outdoors in the sunshine and work manual labor, and then be eating these vegetables again. And I felt great again. And I go back to university. And so that was my first understanding of, and this is going way, way back, when I was, just going to university. So we're talking over 30 years ago. And as a teenager, we made fun of my mom because she was, completely into organic gardening, and we thought she was crazy. And it turned out she was right. And I started to experience the difference. But the thing is most people don't know the difference. They've never had food from a garden. They've never had one of these combinations. They don't know what the impact of that is.
Yeah, and biodynamic gardening, as you know, and when I was living in Europe, I really experienced, that's what got me into this. I got to see plants used as medicine. I studied in Switzerland with the herbologists. I got to see, wow, look at this biodynamic Rudolf Steiner gardens, just a totally different way of living. And then what happens is those microbes really cultivate. But it has to be, the other part is, most of the people that I see in my practice spending most of their time either on electronics or under blue light, having issues with the different types of spectrum. And so what we found is that if you don't get the outdoor exposure and you don't put your hands in the soil, or you go with a dog walking or whatever and touch some plants or whatever, it's that interaction you had with the garden. So actually do some gardening, get your hands in the soil. That's what we've seen, where people reverse literally diabetes. We've had people reverse rheumatoid arthritis by getting down into the earth and connecting with the microbes, and then having at the same time the exposure to some real food that's biodynamically grown, and also being outside an hour a day. One of my mentors used to say, tell everybody that the minimum exposure is, whether it rains or shines, you've got to be outdoors at least 30 to 60 minutes a day. And what are we doing, right? Most people are sitting inside the whole day and then saying, wow, that's all I do, so.
It's it's interesting how humans evolved through well-distributed efficiency models, both biologically and cognitive. And that led to technological innovation that made us the dominant species on the planet, despite our physical limitations. And yet that same mechanism that allowed us to become the dominant species is now actually counter, because technology is outpacing the biologically tendency for energy efficiency. So now we become lazy couch potatoes that are just getting everything through convenience, but that convenience didn't take into its model about the detrimental effects of ultra convenience. It's the biggest irony of the technological revolution that we've experienced as a population.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: supercharge your protein shake. Everyone knows protein shakes are a great way to sneak in extra protein, build more muscle, even replace meals and burn more fat. The problem is the highest quality protein typically absorbs at around 40%. One way to fix this and dramatically increase how quickly and effective your protein shake digests is to add 2 to 3 capsules of masszymes into your shake. One research study showed that pre-digested protein during a meal increased muscle growth significantly. To take advantage of this, just blend the open capsules into your shake, and within 15 minutes or less, the enzymes will have begun to break down the protein into amino acids. This can make your shakes at least 2 to 3 times more potent. Some people do this and sip on their shake while lifting to provide their muscles with a steady stream of amino acids during their workout. To save 10% on masszymes, use the code SHAKE10, that's SHAKE10, at masszymes.com. That's SHAKE10 at masszymes.com.
Yeah, and that almost, set us up then with the quality, because when you ask people, the average person, where you get your water from, right? When you look at the blue zones where they're getting their water, they spend most of their day, with the earth or outside or doing physical exercise. Then the elders are in a circle, they're gathering the plants and the herbs that they're going to put into all these rich, polyphenol rich and stews and antioxidant rich foods, right? And there's a sense of belonging, a sense of community, which brings a really important point, is that when we belong and we're in community, eating disorders go away. I did a lot of research at Stanford. We found in those communities where people live, where they share food on a regular basis, lo and behold, eating disorders were less. But I think there's something about the isolation about what happened to us that contributed to that, in terms of people also lowering their gut diversity just by the high stress of isolation, trying to, connect with people digitally, which was not the same, through all the exposure, much more exposure as a result of that.
Yeah, I think that's what's really interesting about digital technology, as powerful as it is, and it's wonderful that we can connect through video screens. But it's essentially replicating what biologically we experienced throughout history. At one time, you had to actually physically go to your neighbor or go to the next place, and your capacity to move around and get around was certainly limited, or the amount of people and connections you could make. So the trade-off, as I say, that Thomas Sowell, great American philosopher, said there are no solutions in life, only trade-offs. And so what we trade off in grace and ease and technological and expansion of knowledge and information, we gave up on these biological factors that have evolved over millions of years.
Yeah. And also, how you're born. I mean, I was making the analogy in the blue zones, a child that's born with a natural childbirth, and that, up until the age of 6, they're getting, they're breastfeeding, they have really clean air, with the diet, they have all these yogurt cultures they make, even for, the young ones, they really get everything from the earth. Their hands are in the earth, in the dirt, here, one of my clients said, gosh, I was born C-section. And then when I was 2 years old, they took out my tonsils, which is, was for her, she realized, a big immune supporter. And she said, from then on, I was on antibiotics for the first 10 years. Well, she ended up getting diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at the age of 20. But she started out being C-section, getting a lot of vaccines as a child, lots of antibiotics, everything was done in a way that she said, gosh, I want to reverse this. What do I have to do as a 20-year-old to get my life back?
So what do they have to do? I'm curious, like what are some things that people need to do in order to kind of reverse this trend and give them, and of course their children, their families, a better chance, or their aging parents?
Yeah. Well, one of the key factors is we take a careful look at what they're actually eating. How is the food grown? What are they eating and drinking, right? So get them off the tap water with 50 chemicals in every gulp. Get them off showers that have so much chlorine and chloramines. They're, oh my God, one shower and bath gives me 8 glasses of chlorines in a day. Had no idea. So these people are looking at how they're living in their homes, lots of mold in some homes, lots of toxicity. Also, what are you eating is the key, because they were eating white flour, white sugar, basically, and no whole foods, like 20% whole foods and 80% was the foods that, the inflammatory foods. So we all know what they are. However, there was not, it was like a bear, and all I do is grab for these foods, I can't stop eating the sugar. So we did that. Within 3 months, we had reversed many of the effects. I have several, I think we had like 10 people with ulcerative colitis, which is an autoimmune disorder.
Wow.
And the doctor told them, you're going to be on these steroids for the rest of your life. You will have to take, the prednisone at a certain level, then get to a new drug. So they were on 5 drugs, came into our clinic. And the physician said, well, let's keep them on the drugs, but let's see what we can do to change what they're taking into their bodies, how they're living, and also assess the microbiome, which is what we do at Digestive Health Center. So what I found, which was amazing, is that within 6 months, like even these are people who've had ulcerative colitis for 10 years or more, within 6 months of changing what they take into their bodies, they could reduce their meds. Within a year, they were off the meds. So again, there's no quick fixes, but we help people reverse, a lot of people with diabetes, RA, ulcerative colitis, IBD, they come in and say, what can I do? I want to reverse this. Well, it's not a quick fix because it depends on how many years. So it's individualized therapy. All of functional healthcare has to be customized. We do stool testing, blood testing, saliva, do a total workup on them. We look at all the meds. We don't take them off any meds. We honor their doctors. We send them reports. And the docs, after a year, the docs were throwing the papers in the air and said, I've never seen this before. What did you do? Well, all of these people went off the meds. They are now traveling. They're having babies. Many of them are women who were told you'll never have children. And they were able to literally change the genetic outcome. Again, it's the epigenetics. We told them, yes, you got the genes, but that's not your fate. However, we've done this with hundreds of people. The people were dedicated 100% to wanting to do this and doing whatever it took. So it took a while to change.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing people have to recognize. Yeah. They want the one thing and they want it fixed immediately.
Yeah.
And that type of thinking is exactly the mentality that got you into trouble in the first place, because you're trying to look at a composite of factors and narrow it down to one specific condition with, maybe 2 or 3 different possible drug interactions that you would have to take. And, oftentimes you'll cycle through a bunch of drugs and it might work for a while and abate the symptoms, but not actually treat the underlying condition. And so there's a purpose for maybe some medications that, hey, we can stop the problem right now. But at the end of the day, to go back to the source is what you're talking about, is let's deal with the source. And it sounds like you're taking all of these individuals had these conditions, say, fine, that's what your doctor said. That's great. That's maybe alleviating the symptoms of that condition to whatever level of moderate okayness that is. In other words, you can live in a compromised fashion. But you're saying is like, okay, well, why not live your best life? And here's the way to do it. And that's going to take a little bit of time. And there's a process. And you're using scientifically driven models saying, okay, well, we're going to do your stool test. We're going to look at your saliva. We're going to look at these things and say, oh, yeah, you're missing these cultures. So let's say you have some missing cultures or some overgrowth.
Yes.
Do you try to deal with all the cultures at one time, or do you kind of knock out the most offensive ones, get the population? Because this is a topic that I think is not really well understood in the whole probiotic nature. Is like, how do you reintroduce colonies that will enhance your health in a systematic way that you're going to be able to develop that if you've lost it or didn't have it in the first place? How do you do that?
Well, the key is fertilizing the garden. You know, there's a myth. I've got a cartoon on my slideshow which says, well, let's go buy some bifida here in the health food store, some lacto. You know, people would go in, they'd buy like 10 different species. And that's what I need. You know, I've been taking these. I just want to throw it at the gut. And then I said, well, what are you eating? What's feeding those bacteria? Because in order to make the short chain fatty acids, you've got to have robust microbes and fermenting your fibers, right? So if you're eating beans and oatmeal and the good grains, and you're doing, you know, the right vegetables to ferment the fibers, then you're going to boost your short chains, which will boost your immunity and lower your inflammation. Most people short chain butyrate, which is the most abundant one that lowers inflammation, is 0.2 on the tests that I do. It should be 2.5.
Wow.
So it's amazing.
That's like 20 times lower than what it should be.
Yeah. And they say, oh, I'm doing great. And I say, well, look at what you're actually eating, or what are you doing? And so we're looking at culturing the soil first. You know how when you create the garden, you got a couple of weeds growing. Let's look at what feeds the garden, right? So the key is the prebiotic rich foods like, you know, leeks, asparagus, onions, garlic, if they don't have SIBO, you know, which is a whole other disease, if they can tolerate it, and fennel, eating those in abundance with the dark leafy greens, the bone broth to help heal the leaky gut, but looking at how can we prepare the soil, right? So first we have to till the soil, make sure you're eating the right ingredients for your soil, so that then when we bring in the microbes, we're bringing these colonies, they're not going to colonize if the soil is not prepared properly. So this is important. People spend billions on, they come in with all these supplements. I took these probiotics. What happened? It didn't take hold. It's because we don't prepare the microbiome garden adequately to really for these things to take hold. And then we do the precursors. So, you know, we had precursor, like for the ones that, you know, I was mentioning earlier that get depleted. F. prausnitzii is very low in almost everybody I see. And Eubacterium halide, they've all had long COVID, or they have, you know, whatever symptom. And they're saying, hey, what can I do? Well, I'm not going to give them a bottle of prausnitzii. I'm going to give them different strains that will cultivate that. So they're precursors.
That's really interesting. Now, I have a question. And this is a theoretical question. I don't know if you can answer it. Are there bacteria strains that have now mutated because of the interventions that were advocated, and some would mutate in a negative direction and some would mutate in the positive? Is that being studied right now?
You know, there's some research that does show that there's many bacteria that are changing their form, right? Because of what we've introduced into the body. So you can get some pretty challenging strains developing.
Yeah, that's the part that I think becomes really, you know, what a lot of people don't realize is what was marketed as a vaccine was actually a change in definition from an mRNA gene-based theory. And according to Dr. Malone, who was taken off the airwaves extensively, who developed the technology originally, he said he never thought it should be used in this type of way. It's an amazing delivery agent with a lot of positives, but in this type of condition, you couldn't predict what the potential outcomes are. And this is the world of epigenetics. So you have, switch on and switch off, and there's, millions of these things. And of course, the range of genetic the genetic material in our gut biome is exponentially larger than the whole human organism. Do you know what those ratios are?
Incredible. Yeah, it's literally, the number of genes. It's 10 times the number of genes. But let me just look back here, because that's one of the things that I actually wanted to talk about. So there's 100 trillion microorganisms, 10 times the number of cells in the human body, 150 times as many genes than we have.
Yes,
So
and
this is
just to be clear for people, the one of the head representatives of Pfizer had said, well, if you had said a few years ago before the pandemic, we're going to introduce a novel gene therapy to the world, you wouldn't have had any uptake. But we've successfully been able to implement this by changing the definition of what a vaccine is and misidentifying that to an unsuspecting population. And I would suspect an unsuspecting political class, because we're talking about very complex and serious science, and not all the scientists are in agreement of all of this information. There's no science as a word that is a static thing. Science is a moving model. In other words, you understand that your theory is somewhat not 100%, but you keep trying to disprove things in order to refine your model. You're having a model of the world, not an absolute accuracy, because of things like the Heisenberg principle and things like that. You can never be 100% sure, and that requires humility, which I didn't see a lot of in the scientific, the political, or the media world on both sides. On both sides of the aisle, everybody was very certain that their way was right and everybody else was wrong. And I think that is very contraindicative of any way of arriving to a successful conclusion. And of course, taking away or essentially coercing people to go against what they felt was right for them, and othering people on both sides of the equation. I think that's really detrimental for healthy societies. And going back to that blue zone about social anxiety and the importance of social connection. Well, when you have these things disrupting that normal social communication, and we had I had problems within my family structure, within my business structure, within my friends' influence, and I think everybody else can say the same thing. We can all agree that this was extremely disruptive for our social relationships, as well as potentially our biology.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see many people now, with what is called long virus syndrome, that the physicians see. And it's really sad, because so many young people that we see have serious problems with their gut as a result of what they went through. So a big part of it is literally having to start rebuilding when they're no longer able to manufacture their vitamins, absorb their nutrients. Their gut is also permeable. So they've got all of this whole spectrum, and they're 25 years old. So what do we do to rebuild? They'll help them. They're slowly starting to rebuild, but it is just like the social fabric. It's a tremendous interrelationship, and damage to the lining is just like the damage to the social fabric you're talking about.
Yeah, indeed. And that's devastating for sure.
And the good news is we've got an amazing number of people who are reversing these issues.
Right. So what else are they doing? So you talked about, the morning routine and putting these elements in. What are the other things that people have to consider about?
Well, I think one of the most important things was the critical part that prebiotic foods do in cultivating the garden. I really want to emphasize asparagus, cultured yogurt, make your own yogurt, kimchi, beet kvass, drink the juice every day, onion, sauerkraut. That created the soil, while at the same time, you've got 10, we gave people 10 different colors of veggies and polyphenols and flavonoids and probiotic resistant starches, richness of soil diversity, I would say that is the key, and to get all the sugar out, because the neutrophils can't function with sugar, and neither can, the white blood cells. So I think what we found is we actually got people together in groups to implement the soil enhancement, to revitalize, to recharge. And we found that when people use the right antimicrobials, this brings me to an important point. I always say, why guess when you can test? So we have 4 different gut testing companies. So we always meet with somebody first to see what gut test is right for them. We have them do a stool culture. Amazingly enough, we've been able to identify serious dysbiotic strains, some of them worse than before, but with the right microbial intervention. And some of these microbes we've done from the European research or the Australian research, we're able to see pre and post studies that these microbes that are proliferating, that lead to all these issues, inflammation, leaky gut, are now in combination, though, with the things I said, the soil, then we give them, the right culture testing, then we re-inoculate them with the right microbes, and we look at every aspect of the life. So we're literally doing a gut revival program now for people.
Wow.
Which is very exciting. Gut revitalization, revival, and renewal. And weight loss, weight falls off, because people are saying, post-pandemic, my weight never comes off. How weight is such an issue. Turns out that they weren't absorbing anything they were eating. So when you have malabsorption, the more malabsorption you have, the more weight you gain. So this is what we're doing now. It's a new program.
So this would be classified under the functional tests that you're doing. Yes. So what are the whole range of functional tests that you're doing? Because you mentioned, and I thought that was really poignant that you mentioned that you're doing 4 different gut biome tests, because every, the testing kits that are available, and this is also like genetics. I'm going to go on a little bit of tangent here for a list.
Yeah.
And that some of these gut tests are very good at finding some things and not so good at others. And it's the same thing with gene tests. The algorithms that are put into, or the biases that were built into the researchers that led them to development, inadvertently influence the test. So this is why you'll have different genetic tests or different biome tests or different saliva tests, and you can get somewhat different results. And that's the importance of having an expert like yourself to be able to interpret the data, perhaps select the right test based on experience or what might be most pertinent. And then also being able to cross-correlate different data points to come with a better or more accurate conclusion. Would you say that's kind of what you're doing?
Absolutely. That's it, Wade. And the key is also, the American population is an epidemic of GERD. You've probably heard of gastric reflux. Yeah. I mean, every person that comes to us says, I'm on a PPI, proton pump inhibitor. And that is great when they go to the ER and, they're bringing up so much acid that they're about to damage the esophagus and the lining. So basically the PPI is fine for 2 weeks, but most of them have been on PPIs for months and years.
Yeah. And I think the original literature said 6 weeks was something like that's all they were designed for.
Absolutely the max. So the majority of people coming in asking for gut testing, I think, wow, I can't really, I'm on this PPI and I've got eaten acid, if I eat this or that or whatever. So one of the first things we do is we do a baking soda stomach acid test, whether they're on a PPI or not. It's an in-home test. It's real easy to do. You swallow some baking soda, you see when you burp, you write down the time interval. And just like we do stool transit time, we really want to see how long it takes them from the time the food comes in to the time that they go to the bathroom, So transit, if they have more slower transit versus faster affects how they're absorbing and eliminating. But the key is what you're asking me also is inflammation markers. So what we look at is, wait a minute, not just the microbes that are overgrowing, but what's your inflammation in the gut and where is it located? And do you have enough of your digestive organs working? Is your pancreas working? Is your gallbladder working? And are your enzymes intact? And most people on PPIs completely suppressed. So we're working hard to get people into a more balanced state so that they can produce their own stomach acid and absorb what they're eating. I think this is the biggest issue now with the health situation with the healthcare system, is that most people are on drugs where they're not absorbing anymore. And what happens to a culture that has severe malabsorption, severe nutrient deficiencies? The immune system breaks down, the gut breaks down, the brain breaks down. I mean, it's just an epidemic. So we need to very carefully see, what is it going to take, which test tells us, as they go along. Because also, if you don't have enough stomach acid, your microbes overgrow. So there's a direct link between, as you know, enough stomach acid, the microbial landscape, and then what is going on with the meds they're taking. I have a pharmacist on my team, a functional medicine pharmacist, a very rare bird, who works with me on these difficult cases. Like, wow, they're on 6 meds and they're depleted in almost every vitamin and mineral just from the meds. So no one's looking at that. So we're looking at this
That's
very
great.
carefully.
Yeah, and it's so awesome. We covered a lot of this in concept in our most recent book called The Ultimate Nutrition Bible, which is essentially a reference guide for people to kind of select. But you illustrate a really important point, and that is, this is the emerging new paradigm of health, vitality, and longevity. And historically, for our listeners, we have to recognize is that, okay, if you go back to the 1960s, when I'll take my father as an example. He was a young adult in the 1960s, and they implemented Canada pension programs in Canada. I'm from Canada. And the average life expectancy after retirement was about 2 years. So put 65 and you're out at 67. But medical technology, and I would say the advancements, particularly around surgery, I think intervention, acute therapy, and then the reduction of complications from surgery, probably accounted for most of the benefits. So now the life expectancy for someone like him is around 80. And that's just across the board with, as a generalization off in, mortality tables and insurance. And so that put the governments, of course, in big complications about socialized programs. And then so health companies began using the pharmaceutical model in order to bolster the balance sheets, as well as to support political regulation on the industry on both sides. Now we've kind of come full circle on that medical model. And the tipping point was the pandemic. And I think there was evidence from Oshansky in 2003 in the New England Journal of Medicine talking about the disability adjusted life expectancy in the population. And that paper was edited by the White House under the Bush administration because he predicted that children would be living less longer than their parents for the first time in American history. Now, where with the pandemic, that precipice has fallen off, and that is the agencies who have we've trusted for these years, and these organizations who have allowed us to live longer, but maybe in a compromised life, and now are actually, not only are they living a more compromised life as we age, but also are now contributing to the decline of life expectancy. And so we can't really fix that. It's so entrenched, and I think and I admire the people that are going against it, and I understand that model. But the reality is what you're talking about is looking at a new paradigm and assembling what we call your Jedi Council. That is experts who get it, who understand both sets of the both sides of the table, and are saying, hey, look, let's deal with you, the individual. Let's see what's going on for you. Let's look at your history. Let's look at your medications. Let's look at the conditions those are treating. Let's look at your diet. Let's look at what's going on in your bacteria cultures, what's going on in all of these different areas, and then build a strategy to reverse maybe decades and decades of suboptimal living. And on average, someone that comes to you, is they're probably at their rope's end because things aren't working. Oftentimes you're not the first resort, you're the last resort. What kind of time frame is a realistic time that you're seeing for people to overcome all these sort of situations that you're dealing with?
That everyone that starts the program asks me, how long is this going to be? Because of course we want a quick solution, and it depends on the individual's biochemistry and internal environment. The Swiss call it the milieu. The Europeans are very big on, the pH of the internal organs, the pH of the bowels, all this. So what I say is let's do a couple of hours and give you all this testing and information and see how you're living and how committed you are.
Adherence is everything.
Adherence is everything. The commitment, right? What motivates you? So the people that have been like these people that reverse diabetes, ulcerative colitis, they have done a program of 12 weeks, sometimes 20 weeks. Very diligent. We got group support, individual support, monthly follow-up, so they're not left on their own. They keep implementing every month for a year. And after
but that's amazing. Let's just, I think we should take a moment and just reflect on that. We're talking about people who are recovering from years, if not decades, of suffering and suboptimal living, and just let's say it's a year. Let's say it takes you a year to fix decades of damage. What a great investment in the quality of life. I mean, and that means, to me, it's indicative that your body wants to work the way it was designed if you give it the right materials. And that's an empowering message that we can get. We started kind of on that other side of it, but I want to kind of leave people with that.
Yes, that's fantastic. And what's so exciting, what really keeps me going with the people that are very challenging, is seeing the young people revitalize and seeing elders in their 80s turn things around. It's amazing.
It's super exciting, and you are doing extraordinary work. Now, I understand that you have a very special offer for listeners who might be excited, who might be suffering from something or know someone that's suffering, and they're looking for some answers. They don't know what to do. They don't have the experts available to them. Can you tell us a little bit about that and for our listeners? Because I'm sure there's some people really interested.
So the special offer is that we work with them on, we give them a half off of their microbiome test, the best one for them, and a 1-hour consultation. So the special offer is introductory rate, why guess when you can test. We'll have it on the website. So the website is digestivehealth.center, and they can also call us at 650-856-3151. And when you go on digestivehealth.center, we're going to have an introductory meeting for the gut revitalization program. So we want people to do the testing. So the special offer is the gut test at half off plus the consultation. However, in addition to that, we want to get them into a group program of gut vitality revitalization. There will be a sign up. They can just put their email in. We'll get them into the group, do the introductory meetings on Zoom, and see where everybody is, what's the best program, individual or group. So we're offering both an introduction to the group recharge, gut recharge, and the half off on the gut testing.
Wow, that's awesome. And one of the things I think that is so great if you've been suffering from a condition is to be able to come to a group of other people and seeing people at different stages along that. Some people in worse states, some people in a recovery state, some people right where you're at. And that sense of aloneness and isolation, or you're different than everybody else, becomes obliterated. And then you start recultivating a sense of community, a sense of hope as you see people progress. And that becomes very important, because if you go back out into your regular environment, your regular social circles, your regular experts who may not be aware of these things, you're often met with things that chip away at your own confidence in what you're doing. And that group component, I think, is something that can't be underestimated in people's effects. So I think that's really prudent of you guys to offer that. Thank you for that. That's really grateful. So we'll have all the links to the website, to the phone number. I'm encouraging people to take advantage of this offer, this situation. We talk about it in the Ultimate Nutrition Bible. You need those experts to help you guide through this incredible landscape. And you're doing that. So Christine, thank you so much. Any final words you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I think the key is to, no matter what happens in your life, know that you can always reverse any damage, revitalize and regenerate your body on every level. So I just want to give that positive message to listeners. It's possible at any time, in any place.
Well, thank you so much, Christine. And for all our listeners, thank you for joining. Please take the time to share this with the people that you love, the people that are suffering. Give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and of course, take the time, effort to get your testing right so that you can take the best course of action for you. We encourage that at Bioptimizers and the Awesome Health Podcast. I'm Wade T. Lightheart. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip, rapid cheat meal relief. Research shows that cheat meals can actually be an effective way to boost your metabolism. One key weight loss hormone, leptin, can be increased by up to 30% following a cheat meal. The challenge with the cheat meals is that all those extra calories and lower food quality can be hard to digest, which means you could be totally sidelined with a food coma after big cheat meals. The solution is to take strong digestive enzymes like masszymes, which will help rapidly digest and break down the extra food. 3 to 5 capsules before or right after your cheat meal can make a huge difference in how you feel following the cheat meal. If it's a cheat day with multiple large meals, you might want to go up to 10 capsules or higher to help you power through all that food. To save 10% on masszymes, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and enter the code CHEAT10 at checkout.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.